are in the world. This is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends, and I have an exceptional panel today. I, of course, have Jeanne, who has helped me get through while Allison is away, and we don't know when Allison is returning yet. I have Kimi Avery here, and I'm happy to have her. And of course, you know Kamran Rizvi because he's been here almost every Thursday for over a year now, I believe. Year and a half, maybe, year and 3/4. And then we have Jeff, who just told me that he comes from a purple family. And I want him to explain that after Jeanne does what I need her to do. When we get to Jeff, remember, we want to know something about that purple family, because I didn't know people may like purple, but I didn't know that people's hands were purple. I don't know. Anyway, Jeanne, take it away, please.
Reminds me of a song from the 60s, which all I remember is the name, the Purple People Eater, but, we'll figure that out. So we've been talking about the power of words, and just thinking about how you said Jeff told you that he comes from a purple family. That was intriguing, and now that might change the way we speak about words today, because words put thoughts in our minds. Words are sharper than swords in many cases. The writer and philosopher Joseph Conrad said, "My task, which I'm trying to achieve, is by the power of the written word to make you hear, to make you feel. It is before all to make you see." And the other quote that I picked out for today is from Mother Teresa. And she said, "Kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless." And as we talked about the last session, and we'll get into this session, the power of words can make or break you. They're internally strong. The words you tell yourself can tell how you're going to show up in the world. And the words that you spew out in the moment of emotion can be extremely powerful or extremely hurtful. And that colors the world we're in. So with that, why don't I throw it over to Jeff, and let's just sort of, explore having a purple family.
Oh, well, purple family could be many different things. I could tell you from a star system, but there are actually no purple stars. But when we look back into the night sky, based on refraction and diffusion, there are objects in the night sky that can appear purple to our eyes, but in actuality, they're not purple. But, you can also refer to a purple family these days, not from what I was referring to as a family that represents different opinions. In a country like America, where we have red states and blue states, I like to be from the purple state, where we can agree to either disagree or agree to get along, but we have the opportunity to listen and to appreciate all. I just happen to have a sister who was, ever since she was young, purple was her color. And when I started Pulver.com, I stole purple from her. And I've had it inside of my logos or insignia since, I guess sometime since the late 80s, early 90s. And, there's just purple just shows up in many of our family photos and stuff. And so I give my sister credit for the purple that I've stolen from her, but maybe I added value to. And really, it's a color which brings smiles more than anything else. I've never seen frowns from purple. I've seen lots of smiles, and not even from the music of the Purple People Eater, but it's just there's when you live in the age of Aquarius, anything becomes possible, and we're living in the unbounded times where lots of heavy energy at times, but that shifts. But at the same time, it is the colors that come into our mind that can bring us forward in time and bring us into our moments. So from my perspective, if I had to pick a color, Purple is it. It may not be the entire rainbow, but for me, it is where I'm at.
Well, and actually, it's on the chakra chart. It's the crown chakra is purple, which people often interpret as being very spiritual, and but it's also very royal. So it's a leadership color as well. God, I love purple. Kimi, as the woman with the purple crown, how does that fare with you? And what do you say about the power of words?
Words can make our lives heaven, and words can make our lives hell. The way we talk to ourselves impacts our entire body, impacts our vibrational energy that we put out in the world. It impacts our relationships, and it impacts how the quality of life we're going to have ultimately. And I saw a little post or a little meme the other day that said, I'm going to talk to my dog or talk to myself the way I talk to my dogs. Oh, sweetie, you're so good. I'm so proud of you. What a good girl. Now, that may sound sort of hokey, and yet imagine what we often say to ourselves. You did that wrong. You should have done that better. Why did you put it out that way? Why did you say that to that person? And we're beating ourselves up. And those are mild comments, right? We can say much worse. And in my work and I help men and women to understand each other, women have an internal voice that is sort of like an imaginary being in our energy. Her nickname is Psycho Bitch from Hell, because she tells us a better woman would be taller, thinner, brighter, be a better worker, a better mother, a better lover. And the litany goes on and on and on. And those words are damaging. Those words, from my perspective, come from our instinctual experience, trying to survive. The words that are kind and loving come from our conscious experience, spiritual experience, if you will. Choosing to say and listen for kind things, those are the ones that say, I'm going to, you should do a podcast. You should write that book. Wow, you should be doing this. You're an amazing person. That's the voice you should be listening to, and also practicing talking to yourself that way. I tell men in relationships that if they see their woman, he says, oh, you're beautiful. And she goes like this. So do you see this pimple here? Or do you see this? To just pause her and say, hold on a second. I'm telling you what I see, and I want you to receive it. We often deflect it. Men and women deflect the kind words. So, why? Yeah.
Why?
Why do we deflect them? I think because they feel foreign to us. I think that those kind words are of a more spiritual nature. Our instinct or our ego mind wants to deflect that. And we have to practice receiving them. Even a deflection can show up like this. A woman says to another woman, oh, you look great today. And she says, oh, you do too. Instead of just saying, thank you, and receiving it. So our words, the words that come at us, yeah, there might be ones that you want to have a nice big bubble around yourself to not receive. For instance, I've done an exercise with my clients called Metaphorical Boundaries. And I've been doing this for years. And one woman, her mother would say really mean things to her. And so she imagined a rose bush with prickly thorns on it and that were steel tipped. And every negative thing her mother said would explode there and not come into her heart. Now, if somebody's saying kind words, we want to let our guard down to receive them. Why do we do it? It's habit in part. It's survival, and it doesn't serve us.
So how do we change that? And perhaps we should let Kamran speak, but I'll come back to you with those questions. Hey, Kamran.
Yes, Carla, thank you. And I was enjoying the reflections by Kimi and, of course, Jeff. And Jeanne has thrown us into a situation where we have to use words. And I was just penning down some key thoughts. One was that you are the company you keep. Now, this is an old saying, maybe it's a cliche. And the company here I'm referring to are the words that we make part of our identity, the ones that we use on a day-to-day basis. I feel that that also serves to give a message to others around us as to where we stand and where we are coming from and what we stand for. So that, I think is remarkably important. It's also, I see words as jewels as such, because they adorn us and they, in a sense, enhance our personality because of the value attached to each of the words. And whenever we speak of words, we talk about meanings. And I find that, to have a meaningful life, we need to be up close and personal with words. And by that, I mean that knowing the word is not enough. It is to understand it, it is to experience it, it is to go into the depth of that word and to the depth of experience itself. So if we were to look at the word courage, all of us are familiar with that word. All of us have used it at some point in our lives or many times in our lives. But to what extent have we used it? And what have we gained from using that precious word courage as an example? And when my words mean nothing, then what am I doing? I'm actually nullifying my own self. I mean nothing. And I must tell you, the biggest punishment on this planet is being meaningless. And if it wasn't for words, we would truly be struggling to survive and to live. So exchange of meanings is so, so crucial. And I feel that the ideas we communicate to ourselves and to others, we do that through words. And yes, body language is there, interpersonal communication is there, the vibration, frequency, energy that Jeff speaks about is there. But what about when you're writing? And just one page letter to a friend can be transformative. And it is only possible when words are punctuated well, when the sentences are formed, and your heart goes into what you're saying. And you can tell a script as to whether it's flat or it's laden with depths of feelings and emotions. And it is really a toolkit that we ought to appreciate, admire. And I think ultimately it is what makes us human. And also, in closing, I would say that I saw this movie, Dead Poets Society, which really did inspire me back in the late 80s. And words and ideas can truly change the world, and has done so and will continue to do so. And new vocabulary keeps coming up. And I feel that being in tune with the old and the new is a beautiful blend of creating meaning and significance in our own lives and the lives of those with whom we interact. But we need to take words very seriously because they transport ideas from point A to B. And when they unfold and open, they show their majesty. Of course, words can also be deadly. And we have seen enough examples of that. People shooting themselves in the foot and mindlessly saying things which I feel they live to regret. Why do that? Why do that?
I have a question for you.
Oh, yes.
Not only do words change in meaning, change as we use them, but one word, even with me speaking now, may have a different meaning to you than it means to me.
Yes.
And I know that someone recently got very upset because I used a word and I did it harmlessly, to be honest.
Yeah.
She said, no, I never agreed to that. And I said, wait a minute, quiet for a moment. We all use words in a different way. Yes. What do you say to that? Because that's more of why I asked the question or before making it the topic. Yeah. So okay, Kamran, go.
Yeah. So in my view, culture has a lot to do with this. We all come from different cultures and backgrounds, and maybe the words we share are very common. In fact, even in organizations, a Korean company and a US company may be using the word respect as part of their value set. Yet at the same time, the expression that the word respect finds in Korean company is a very different set of behaviors as compared to what you would find in the US company. So I have a feeling here that it's very important not to jump to conclusions, or when reading a book, not to assume that the author may have meant that. I feel one needs to not take words lightly, and to discover the intended meaning would require more research, more depth, and not to be hasty in drawing conclusions, because if we keep transposing our own understanding of those words on the literature that we read, then we don't gain as much value as we might otherwise have. And in this context, I would like to share a quote from Prophet Muhammad, who in his last sermon is known to have said to the followers who had gathered in Arafat, may the last ones understand these words better than those who listen to me directly. Now, look at the span of meaning. I mean, you're transporting that same word across time, but those words are gaining gravity, more meaning, more value, more richness with the passage of time as human beings become more aware and more conscious. So I have a feeling that words are very dynamic. They don't have a static meaning. And every word, no matter how simple it may sound, carries with it a lot of weight, and we cannot take them lightly.
So if that's true, if you don't understand a word, do you think it's stupid to ask, hey, how did you mean it?
Because no, I think that is the best thing to do. That is what one must do, because we are constantly students and teachers at the same time. And I feel there is no question that you can term as stupid. I think it's good to ask, because if we keep assuming, then we might miss out on the perspective that the other person may have. So it's very, very good to ask. Please elaborate. What did you mean by that exactly? Taking interest and exploring, I think, is very important. To be curious, to want to know, as opposed to being smug.
Jeff, you look like you want to say something.
Sure. So just to get back on the word side of it, words are meaningless unless they're received. And so when we're communicating, even to ourselves, we could hear words, but if we're not listening, then they're going to be going on your own deaf ears. And when you're in a group or one-on-one with another individual, or for that matter, writing to others, if the intended recipient is not receiving what you're saying, it's not necessarily a communication. I believe it's important to understand the intention and purpose of the words used in all cases. That when we speak, whether you're a prophet or whether you're a friend, and there's either a misunderstanding or a word is not being processed, to understand where the person's coming from is key. Every day, I should also mention that, each year there are new words that enter the vernacular, and whether we like it or not, these words are present. The reflections of culture. And sometimes we could be speaking with somebody and not have any idea what they're saying, because they're using the words we know differently, and they change the syntax on us. And here we are agreeing with what's being said, but actually we have no idea what's being said. And so there's the way that words get reused, and triggers. And the thing is, as things evolve, the same word that you grew up loving could actually be a trigger word for somebody else, and you have no idea about it. But the moment you say that word, it releases a whole set of other energies, which you now don't know what to do, because they become the person you're talking to became overwhelmed. Or if you're giving a speech to a group and now you enraged a group when you had no intention to do so, that you were using a term that was very close and personal to you, but for the entire community that you're talking with, they now get really angry at you. And that's happened to me. So I appreciate word choice. Also, if you look at great poetry and great music, right? The music, and then look at the lyrics. There are times when it's the words not spoken that are the most meaningful too. So there's the obfuscation as much as the usage, and it all comes into flow. And I will bring it back to energy, vibration, and frequency, because I believe there are some high vibration words and some low vibration words. And when you look at how countries communicate with each other when they're not necessarily seeing eye to eye, there may be low vibration words associated with that. And when you go back to peace, love, and understanding, hopefully you're getting to a higher vibration words. And so I believe words can create actions and activations. And so you find that balance between word choice, word usage, and really being understood. And to be understood is a whole other conversation, but at least set the intention for the person you're communicating with to understand what you mean. Because as my late mom would always remind us, it's not what you say, but the way you say it. And that's something which rattles around me forever. And that you may have the most nicest, kindest intention in what is being communicated, but it will come across rough. The person may look at you as being rough when and you were coming from a loving perspective, and they see no love in what you're saying because it's in the delivery. So there's a lot of so one word could take on lots of different meanings, and just the way it's delivered goes on and on. So there's great power in words. And each week for the past 17 months, I've been hosting a networking event where each week I choose 3 words for the group, and we go into breakouts. And it's amazing how words create all sorts of challenges with people from different diversity, different cultures. And I've been observing this. Just earlier today, I had a group, and our words for the day were respect, instincts, and opportunity. I picked them. And we spent 15 minutes on each word just describing what it meant to us and how it related back. And it was pretty revealing in terms of how powerful words are. And this came from a positive perspective. And I found that sharing and listening to how people react to words is an amazing way to get to know people. It's an amazing way to get to the depth of who they are, and creates very deep rooted friendships when we're actually able to take a word, share our reactions to it, and at the same time with the understanding of keeping a positive energy space where we're not debating, we're not accusing, we're just here, present, respectful, and listening. And it's words are quite powerful. And when times are hard, I go to certain music, I go to certain poetry that takes me through the time. So words for me also provide that anchor and a blanket to take me out of moments that I otherwise would be stuck in. So there's a lot of respect I give to words, and without words, how would we communicate?
And yet all our minds are slightly different. So all of our minds, even using a word like helps, can mean so many different things to different people.
Yes.
And that creates conversation.
Look, I think that there's going to always be just a discord at some level. At the same time, it's opportunity to connect. And so we communicate by the eyeglasses we wear as much as the words we speak. And everything comes across together as one. And so it's perhaps some provide more accents on the others, but it's I just it's the words that play in your mind, at least in my mind. It's like I have a life of song lyrics playing, and depending upon situations, certain songs just start to play, and they either soothe situations for me, encourage me to take action, or just or it's just there as a lullaby just to take me through a moment. And so it's the words being spoken and the words that I hear inside that matter to me the most.
Okay, and your words, because this is the whole thing, Jeannie, I was getting to. Your words, even if we're saying the same sentence, may have a different context because our two minds are different. Kimi, you're nodding your head. What's going through it?
So the meaning of our communication is the response we get. Because we don't know what culture, even if you grew up next door to somebody and they look that sort of similar to you in terms of what ethnic background, whatever, we are our own unique culture. And when we have no idea how somebody's going to receive something unless we're actually paying attention to how our words are coming out and how they're received. And paying attention means you're watching to see how they're received. You're noticing, are they upset, or did they move back, or did they get excited? You're paying attention to how you're communicating. I think it's easy to just talk without watching your audience. I think that's one of the challenging things about being on video, is because in order to connect with my audience who are listening, I can't look at the people in this group who I'm sort of sharing ideas with, because I have to stay looking at the camera because I want to connect with people. But watching your audience and being aware of how they're receiving something is really important, whether it's one person or lots of people. And our words, as Jeff was saying, does have vibration. How we say it has a vibration. Our intention behind the words has a vibration. You don't actually have to speak the same language to communicate with somebody. I was on a boat one time in Greece going between islands and it was a long trip, and I was with a Greek group of people, and I spoke only English and they spoke only Greek. And we communicated about our lives. We drew pictures, we pantomimed, we had lots of conversations, but they weren't using our words that came out of our mouth. It was using our intention to communicate. So I think communication is a choice, and choosing your words is a choice. The more conscious you are about it, the more positive impact you can have, because you're choosing what you're going to say. Now that, of course, doesn't always happen, but let's say, whether between yourself or with somebody else, because we have responses that happen in response to somebody else's words. We will have a flare up of something sometimes. One of my favorite things to say is that we can be curious instead of furious. Curious. I'm curious. You seem really upset to me. Is something going on that I should know about? That could be their body language you're looking at, but it could be the words that they're saying. I'm curious. I said a word that you looked like you didn't resonate very well with. And is there something that I need to know about that? I learned this a couple of years back, but the difference between African American and Black. Not every dark-skinned person in the United States, for instance, is Black. Is African American. There are people from Jamaica. There are people from Africa. They're not all African Americans. So I could accidentally stumble in and say, oh, my African American friends, and then turn out some people are offended. I was trying to say the right thing. Well, I learned a couple years back, it's better to say Black. Oh, okay. but I didn't know it. I'm not Black, so I don't have a physical experience of that word, but there are other people who do. So taking the time to be curious and also being open to getting feedback on how you say something, what you said feedback from the people around you. Because if you're so protected that you can't get any feedback from anybody, you might find yourself feeling like you're in a isolation bubble because people don't want to play with you. They don't want to communicate with you because you're not fun, because you're not open. Those are some of the thoughts of.
I love it. What do you think, Jeanne?
I think that everything being said is important. Jeff mentioned that communicating isn't communicating if it's not received. Communicating is, I often open a workshop with, do you talk or do you communicate? Because I'm asking people, are they willing to listen? And I walk through what active listening is. When I was coaching executives on how to speak to the media, I had to teach them how to be active listeners, to actually say things like, as I understand it, you're looking for information about, is that right? So they could get feedback from the reporter before they answered the question. I also had to tell them that they weren't on the witness stand, so they didn't have to answer every question, but the intent was to get them to be a participant in the interview, not just somebody who's playing ping pong. You ask a question, I give an answer. You need to be able to guide and move the interview the way you want to. And the same as in an everyday conversation. When you're speaking to somebody, you need to check in. And that's where words really become important, because as Kimi said, you might not be saying the right thing and you have no idea, because there's this phenomenon that I like to point out to people. You don't know what you don't know. And the only way to get to know it is to ask questions and to get feedback. So it's uncomfortable because the majority of time we hear somebody talking to us, we get about 50% of the question, and then we engage the part of our brain that holds our old-fashioned Rolodex, and we start to go through it going, what is it that I'm going to say next? How do I show that I've got this, that I'm really important and people need to hear me? And so you miss the rest of the question. And to illustrate that, I talk about Family Feud, where Steve Harvey stands up and he says, 100 people surveyed say the best room in the house is, and you jump in and hit that buzzer. You have no idea what he's going to ask, really. You just know it's going to be a room in a house. How many rooms can there be? Depends on the size of your house. There's probably a 99% chance that you're going to be wrong and get that big buzzer that goes, nee, and you don't want that. You need to practice. There's a word, practice hearing people and then reflecting back. There's a study that I ran across in my research years ago that showed that people in the workforce spend 17 hours in their 40-hour week undoing or trying to interpret their way through miscommunication. That's half your work week. Think about the productivity you could increase if you just simply listened in the beginning. But as Kamran talked about triggering words, sometimes those words shut you down and you can't hear, and you need to be aware of that. There's a word that I grew up with, and you asked the question and you said, is it stupid to ask the question? Well, stupid is one of those words that trigger me, because that was something bandied about a lot in my family. And it's not that it was done to hurt anybody, because they just, I have 6 brothers and sisters, and that was one of the ways that they would take over a conversation. They would say, oh, that's just stupid. And then they'd take it and go a different way. But it triggers me because I have an emotional reaction to it. So rather than, and usually, Carla, if I'm in the middle of a conversation and somebody asks, is this a stupid question? My first answer is, there is no such thing as a stupid question. If you have a question, ask a question. And the reason is because I'm trying to, I don't know if this is a word, I'm going to make it up, de-triggerize that word, because I realize that I get triggered, and it's not the only word. There are other words that can trigger you, but you need to take a moment, try to understand why it's a trigger, process the emotion behind it, and let it go. And that's not easy to do. Listening, you have to stop. You have to force yourself to hear the rest of the question. And then what I have people do, because it's an extremely difficult skill to build, I have them repeat back in a different phrasing, but repeat back. So typically I'll say, use something like, what I heard is, or as I understand it, you're asking about, using these kind of phrases to bridge back, just to check in. Kimi, what I heard is you really want to do X. And if I'm right, Kimi will go, yeah, that's right. And if I'm wrong, Kimi will go, that's not quite it. And then hopefully put me on the right track. That way we can move the discussions forward and not have so much in that misunderstanding phrase. Because communication, the difference between talking and communicating is that when you're communicating, somebody receives it, processes it, and returns it back. And that's the part that we forget. I mean, I can tell you many conversations that I've had, even in the recent past, where somebody is talking at me as if I don't understand something, and not looking at me, not knowing me, or not recognizing me, in a sense that in my head, I'm going, so he thinks I'm really ignorant or don't know what I'm talking about. And oh, wait. And then what happens is I come up with something that kind of puts that person in their place, which is not what my intent, but I needed to get them away from talking down to me, to recognize that I need you to see me. I need you to hear me, and it's like raising a child. When the child gets into the dreaded 13, transition where they're trying to be an adult and a human and have control and want to prove to you that they can do it, and they're talking back and they're using words that their friends are using and you have no idea what it is, and all of a sudden you just want to scream, stop. What you need to tell the teenager, and I did this with my son when he was young, was like, stop. You need to listen to what I'm saying. I'm not trying to punish you. We need to be clear. Here's what I expect. Here's what I want you to do. Now, what do you think? And it was a very uncomfortable conversation, but it changed our relationship because I was asking him to stop and see me. And I will stop and see you, because he was a different animal than the kid that I'd been bringing up. So I always bring up this, the thing about Avatar was when they said, I see you, I hear you. When that happened in the movie, I went like, oh, that's what we all want. We want to be noticed. We want to be heard. We want to make a difference. And in conversation, we can cut somebody off or we can open the road. And I prefer to open the road. Even though it might be uncomfortable for me, you need to have the road open so that you can have a good discussion. Does that make sense, Carla?
Makes plenty of sense. Kamran, you are nodding your head. What's on your mind?
You're muted, Carmen.
And Kamran, you're muted. We cannot hear you.
Did you mute me, Carla?
No, I don't know who muted you.
See, Kimi, I just accused her of muting me, and you see, I never intended that. Oh my God. Anyway, so
but
I wanted to.
That's the whole point.
Yeah. Well, listen, I just wanted to share an example of how words can enhance a product or a service to a level far greater than what it otherwise would be. Something very ordinary, everyday experience can be enriched and enhanced. And I'll not mention the brand, but I will read the description, and I don't even want you to guess it. But I was fascinated by this simple product, which is described in such a delicious way. So here it goes. For well over a century, the adventurous flavor of XYZ has fired up generations of thrill seekers. Its all natural ingredients and unique aging process in white oak barrels keep XYZ on the culinary cutting edge. Try it on any food for a burst of flavor that will tantalize your taste buds. Wow. I mean, this was an example which I thought, exemplifies the power of words. How a simple product could be made so attractive and appealing. Thank you, Carla.
And that happens all the time. Just like what happened with muted and unmuted.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how you got muted unless you did it yourself. Because
I must have done it myself, and I forgot all about it. And I was busy searching this passage that I had to share with you because I thought it was a good example of power of words and how it can lift the ordinary into the extraordinary realm.
And yet we use words without even thinking about that. For an example, in the English show, people come in and say, I cannot speak English. And I automatically, it triggers me. And I want to say and I do say to them, you can do it. You have just done it. You need to believe in yourself. Take not out of your vocabulary. And someone came to me once and said, do you know how violent you are when you say that?
Whoa.
And there's no violence there in my mind. It's helping someone learn that, hey, believe in yourself. But this person felt that I was being violent and mean to people. And I'm like, how can I say it any other way? I don't know. Kimi, your hand went up as if you may be able to give me an answer.
I think that, well, and I don't know which type of English speaking students or English learning students you typically got, but other cultures have different ways of receiving criticism or feedback even, and energy. I just had this imagination. Now notice that I because I don't know, I'm interjecting a word, imagination, that your students are mostly Japanese. Maybe that's because I have friends who've taught Japanese students, but I know that English learners in the Japanese culture are often very timid. They want to be perfect. They want to do it well. So they're more concerned. So if you come with an energy, you can do it. Don't say that. You just spoke English and you've got this passion behind it, which is beautiful. They may feel feel energy rather than the words themselves that cause them to feel nervous. And it's a more gentle, sometimes, culture. I'm imagining a Japanese friend of mine who is very soft-spoken, wanting, if I'd come on with a passionate energy with her, that would have been too much. So I'm curious, what type of English speaking students do you have, or English learning students?
They're all from around the world.
Yeah.
And it depends who I'm talking to. I have, yesterday we spoke about this on Clubhouse for a tiny bit because I had two of my students who have been there, and both said when I first met Carla, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I give? What am I saying to you? And the young gentleman said to me, no, it's just that I didn't know you. And I'm from Pakistan, and people don't talk to people like that. And there was nothing I said that I'm still trying to dissect what I say. And
Well,
then
culture.
there was a lady from Vietnam who is always there. I mean, and she said, well, the first time I spoke to Carla, I almost cried online. And I'm like, what? She's been with me for over a year, doing this and practicing. So it's been a concern for me, the power of words and how we use them. And, I always laugh as I'm saying this because I know that it's difficult for them. But you're right, it's a cultural thing. Yes, Jeannie?
I advocate for people to travel and to get out of your comfort zone physically. I was in Europe. I was working with Philip, so I was in the airport in Amsterdam on my way home, and it was, okay, people who know me, they know how horrific this is. It was 8:00 in the morning, which meant I had to be up at 5:30 and get on the bus at 6, and I was not awake. I needed caffeine to put directly into my veins. I was so tired. And there was some hubbub in the airport at 6:30 in the morning, and you have to go through the gate and then go through customs, and there was all this stuff you have to do. And I was finally got to the gate, and it was relatively quiet. And out of the blue, I hear a Texas twang going, "What do you mean the plane's being delayed?" And this woman on the other side of the terminal, like so far away I should not have heard her, is standing there. And in my mind, the old cliche that I've heard over and over, especially in movies, the ugly American hit my ears. And I went, oh, okay, she's not doing anything out of normal. She's a strong personality. She's got a relatively booming voice that can carry, but it disrupted that whole wing of the terminal because that's her being her. And so I kind of walked over and I said, obviously you're American. And she looked at me and she goes, oh my God, you speak English. So she had been over for work and had been talking with a number of different European folks, obviously, and had just reached her fill of having to interpret what she's saying. And I know this because I'd asked her several questions about why she was feeling so anxious. And it dawned on me that we Americans are very direct. It's in our culture to be very direct. And it's in our culture to look people straight in the eye. And so there's lots of things that we do that are counter to other cultures around the world. One is speaking direct and speaking with energy. And I learned that very well in that case. So when I had a Japanese woman working for me, I saw it in a different way. When she was working with me, we were direct, we were talking, we were coming up with plans and strategies, and she was saying, no, you can't do it this way. But she was respectful, but she was very American. And this is a woman who's of Japanese descent. And then the boss walks in, and it's a male executive. He walks in and she turned literally on a dime. She went, ah, yes, sir. And she bowed just a little, and her voice got softer, and she spoke a little bit quieter. And she handled the business, and I talked with the executive in my usual way. And then he left, and I looked at her and I said, "What was that?" And then she explained the Japanese culture and what was expected. So we need to open our eyes often on how we're seen, how we're received, because in many times I'm told I'd like to be that way, but that's just not correct, but we have to learn to step back a little, to listen a little, to allow others to have their space. So that's the part, the beauty of words and the beauty of energy and the beauty of communication is it's an ongoing dance, an ongoing negotiation of what do you take, what do you, I don't want to use the word reject because that sounds too violent to me right now, but what do you take, what do you leave behind, and who's in the lead, who takes over the lead. So we become this rhythm while we're speaking, and the power of the words and the power of how you present the words really come through on that nonverbal area, that nonverbal space. So I'd like to dispel the idea of the ugly American, because I think it's still out there, because it has to do with how we show up. There's nothing wrong with showing up and being strong and saying what you say to the students, Carla. It's just how they're picking it in, how they're picking it up. And that's where that lovely dance comes in, understanding where they are, they understand where you are. You go back and forth, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Well,
Right.
And Carla, with new students, you could say to them, I'm an American. Sometimes I'm more loud than other cultures. And I'd love it if you would give me feedback. If sometimes I come off a little bit too intense for you, would you be open to doing that for me? Because I'd like to learn from you too, because I learn from my students as they learn from me. Something like that could be an invitation that would help them feel safe to give you the feedback. And I agree with what Jeannie said, traveling is so important because you get to realize that there are many cultures around the world. Being American isn't the only way to be. And you can even learn to speak what I call traveler. A little slower, enunciate your words, choose words that people can understand. Be conscious about how you're communicating and how your words are being received.
And that's important. And I constantly say, hey, I need you to speak slower. I know you are nervous speaking right now, but when you speak slower, I can understand you better. I am speaking slower now than I normally speak. Please, understand the importance. And they, and again, I'll say, please say it slower for that exact reason. And it takes time for people to understand that and trust it, because they think the sounds are exactly the same in their language and English. And no, they are not. Kamran, because we're about to close anyway very soon, what are your last words for the day? And you need to unmute yourself, Kamran.
Culture has been mentioned quite a lot today, and I would like to just mention the fact that there are high context cultures and low context cultures. And I think the United States, for example, is low context, or Germany for that matter. And I'm generalizing. Within one culture, as Kimi mentioned, that the neighbor may have a different culture and individuals have their own. But if you were to broadly generalize, East tends to be very high context. So it's not just what you're saying, it's where you're saying it, how it's taken, how it's interpreted. There's a lot of indirect messaging going on. So if you came to my house in Pakistan for a cup of tea, then you would be waiting for half an hour because there'll be some kebabs and samosas and snacks being prepared. And then the tea would arrive. Whereas there are some people who invite you for tea and that's all you get. So low context and high context, I feel, are things that we will only discover when we travel and meet with people from different backgrounds and origins. The Chinese tend to be very high context. And of course, when they come to the US and they study in the universities there, they do discover that indirect is not working out for them. Because if they want to take someone out for dinner, they'll go round the bush by saying, hey, I'm in town, I'm just by your office. Can you recommend a restaurant? Now, what they're really saying is join me for lunch, but they're not saying it directly. So I feel that, yes, we need to understand and appreciate that there are these differences. And as we become more aware, we learn how to adapt to different people and situations and cultures and contexts.
Thank you, Jeff.
So when I first heard the topic of the day being the power of words, I thought maybe we'd be talking about Scrabble strategies. Because if you actually want to see words, how powerful they are, construct them playing Scrabble and look at your friends' reactions, and you could say, wow, because that's Z. Wow, I got those letters in. I got those vowels. How did I do that? So words are very powerful. Also, if you want to appreciate the power of words, something we didn't discuss at all today is telegrams. But there was a time when you were charged per word to send a message. And some of the most amazing messages in the world were conveyed during the era of the telegram, where people had to be sparingly using certain words to get across messages. And before telegrams, telegraph. And so if you talk about how powerful words are, if you look at some of the famous telegraphed messages that came across from the 1700s forward, you will see how powerful words have been used. And when I still remember using telegrams, particularly to express loss or to express gratefulness or to express when someone passed. And it's just amazing what happened. So if you have time, look up some of the famous telegrams, and you'll see how powerful word choice matters, and how very few words can be used to express greatness, and in many great ways, positiveness and great amount of information being sparingly shared in very few amount of words. So it's telegrams and the power of Scrabble. Thank you.
And look at text messages.
Yeah, but we're not efficient with that. We're not efficient with that. But when every text matters, right? When you're paying per character and you have a limited amount of money to send a message about something that happened, it's surprisingly how efficient we become in our word choice.
Yeah.
I'll need to look into that. Maybe next week we'll do that. Oh, you won't be here next.
I know I'll be. I'm going to be on the road, but please consider that.
That could be a really cool topic. In any case, we have come to an hour and it's time to end the show. I want to thank Jeanne and Kimi and Kamran and Jeff for speaking with me today on the power of words. And I actually am thinking we should continue this, but we'll talk about it. In any case, MindPlore is over and the English show is here in 30 minutes. And feel free to join me. And we are going to wave goodbye. And also, guys, check out my YouTube channel because all of these shows are now on YouTube also. Giggle Fest University. Jeanne, I'm remembering.
That's good.
Can you say it again?
Giggle Fest University.
I love it.
And like, comment, and subscribe.
That's right.
Like, comment, and subscribe. People have been watching, but no one has been liking and commenting. One comment is really worth a lot to me.
That's the feedback loop that we could use.
Right.
And also saying it at the end of each video is good.
Thank you so much, Kimi, for reminding me to do that.
Giggle Fest
University. where we come to laugh, smile, and laugh as we learn new things.
I love it. I found it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.